So for today's player profile, we're going to be discussing Buddy Hield, the Warriors' new sharpshooter acquisition from, once again, the Klay Thompson trade, 6-team deal, acquired from Philly in a sign-in trade, as reported by Shams. Buddy Hield's 31 years old. He's been in the league for many, many seasons on various teams such as the Kings, the Sixers, and he's hopped around on the Pacers. So he's been a journeyman throughout his career, but one thing he can do is shoot the ball, and he's one of the best at it in this era. So let's begin. Buddy Hield last season played 32 games for the Philadelphia 76ers. Obviously, he started the year off in Indiana, playing 52 games over there, but he ended his season in Philly via trade. In Philly, he played 25.8 minutes per game. So he was a rotation player. He didn't play a lot of minutes, but he also wasn't someone that was mostly on the bench. He was someone that was part of the rotation. He was in frequent lineups as a spacer next to Joel Embiid, and he was a valuable piece. They needed to add extra shooting, and they did in that trade. So last season for the Sixers, he averaged 12 points on 42.6% from the field, 38.9% from three, 3 rebounds, 3 assists, and 0.8 steals. So you see, looking at the box score, he's a very efficient shooter. Now, obviously from the field, not as much as the 3-point line, but that we'll get to later in terms of his weaknesses and some of the things he struggles with. But he's a double-digit scorer. So he's someone that in 25 minutes a game last season put up 12 points a night, a few rebounds, a few assists. He can do a little bit of everything. I wouldn't say he excels at anything outside of just shooting, but he is a sniper, and
And
we're going to delve into that further. Yeah.
right. One thing I want to add though, also, you're right, Tio. He does have the most threes since 19, but that we know is because of injuries to the Splash Brothers. One thing with Buddy is throughout the years, he's a elite shooter, man. He has these stretches where he gets hot. He can give you 30 plus points. There's games where when he gets hot, Buddy's streaks last long. He can get hot and he can give you like 4 to 3 games of like 20 plus points, 30 plus points. He's done it before to where when he gets hot, he gets really hot and he has a quick trigger, right? So he doesn't need much space and he will be such a great system fit because coming off those pin downs and coming off those split actions, when he's hot, he will not need any room. He's going to let it fly. And when he's in a rhythm, it's going to be very good. Like he has games where he drops 30, 40. He's done it in the past where he has multiple 40-point games in a year. So he is someone that, we can rely for offense. I know we say we don't have much offense, but Buddy is one guy this year we will rely on a lot for offense. And he
Yeah,
can be consistent in the regular
100%.
season, at least in the regular season.
100%. Yeah, he came into the league as a sharpshooter. Obviously, the Kings drafted him for that reason, and like I said, he's hopped around, been traded a few times from the Kings. I think he was on the Pelicans for a brief stint. Then he went to the Pacers, the Sixers now. So he's been a journeyman throughout his career. But one thing he provides every single team he's ever been on is elite 3-point shooting.
Yep.
He is one of the best shooters of the modern era. He has the most threes made in the entire league since 2019-2020, the beginning of this decade. Now, obviously, that has to do with the fact that Steph broke his hand that season. Klay was hurt for a few years. But Buddy Hield, he played more games than Steph. But in terms of his production and his ability to get shots off in volume and being efficient at the same time, he's as good as they come. There's very few players in the NBA that you could name from a volume and efficiency standpoint, on top of the longevity that Hield has demonstrated over the years, that compare to Buddy Hield. He stands out. Obviously, within that stretch, 39% on three, on 8.7 attempts. So from 3-point land for his career, 39% from threes on 8.7 attempts. What do we think about that, Bubba, in terms of the volume?
Dude, I always say, if Stephen Clay never existed, people talk about Buddy as an old time. Like he is one of the best shooters. It's just that he was, he played in the era with the greatest shooters of all time. Like He played in the era with the Splash Brothers, right? So he is an all-time great three-point shooter. If Stephen Clay never existed, it would be him and Dame for this era. People would be talking about him because like he has high volume and he has efficiency, right? So he is one of the best. And I mean, if you were ever gonna replace, if you were ever gonna replace Clay, I'll say this as a Clay fan, he would have been a perfect replacement, right? He is the ideal Clay replacement, a two guard that can space next to Steph. That is an elite shooter. Him and Steph are one of the best shooters in the NBA. So we still have that, right? We still have two of the best shooters in the league. So yeah,
And
I mean,
just on
he was
top of
always
that, right?
a replacement.
To clarify too, 39.2% from three on 8.7 attempts this decade. So
Right. Yeah.
from
Yeah. Right.
in 2020 until now, that's a 5-year span, right? You have 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023, and 2024. In the 5 years that he's led the league in threes total, he's also shot 39% on those shots and attempted 8.7 of them a game. So the efficiency and volume is as elite as they come for Buddy Hield. And on top of the longevity. So he's in the class of, the Clays,
The Steph's,
the Hardens, right? I
the
think
Dame.
Steph is in a league of his own, but
Right. That's of course.
I would put Buddy Hield at the top of the list in tier 2, right? You
I
look at
would as
tier
well.
2.
Outside of him, outside of Clay, who's better than him? Or you can even argue he's better than Clay now. I will agree with you. Like he's really good, man. I don't know. Some people are down on him, but he can be good for us.
100%. Now, just to expand further on his skill set, he primarily is proficient off the catch, right? So that's his greatest attribute as a shooter is catch and shoot situations, spotting up. He has a very quick trigger. One thing you'll find out quickly about Buddy Hield, he can get that shot off fast. He doesn't hesitate. He doesn't need much space to get it off either. A lot of his shots are very difficult. They come contested, but it doesn't make a difference. He's able to get a shot off easily and efficiently, even with that level of defensive attention. And you're going to see that this season from Buddy. That quick trigger is going to be a huge asset, especially in the offense that we run, where space is created, separation is created off the ball. We're going to be using that to our advantage. In addition, he shot fakes and side dribbles. That's one of his patent moves that he pulls out whenever a defender closes out on him or flies by. He'll do the shot fake and then left side dribble, and that essentially creates separation. It's a very subtle move, but it's one that gets him in rhythm, gets his feet set, and he's able to knock it down. And he has practiced that throughout the years. He's added different wrinkles to his shot making, and this is just one of them, which is very effective. Spotting up, like I said earlier, right? Making sure his feet are set. He's in position, ready to catch and shoot. And one thing you'll find about Buddy as well this season is that he doesn't necessarily need balance, or he doesn't need to always be square. He can still get shots off and knock them down at a very proficient clip, even without the traditional formation of a shooter, the traditional stature and form, right? His movement shooting, for example, he's able to control his momentum off the ball. He's able to play with pace and understand how to decelerate, accelerate, on point, on target, set his feet, and get in line with the basket, shoulder square, feet straight, shot off. But even if it's not as perfect as, picture perfect as that type of shot and formation, he's still capable of getting it off. And that's another unique aspect of Buddy Hield is that he doesn't have to have the perfect, placement of his body to get a shot off cleanly. He can still get it off the move, or if a defender's closing out on him, he's capable of shooting the ball efficiently, no matter the situation. And then, like I mentioned earlier, he has this proclivity to take and make a high degree of difficulty jumpers. So these jumpers aren't necessarily wide open or, within a few feet of space from the defense. These are shots that are difficult, that are coming off the move, where defenders are closing out, where teams are scouting for him off of screens. These are things that Buddy Hield does, And he does them so well, even when he's off balance, even when his feet aren't set, even when he's not, in the best of situations, he still manages to get shots off and knock them down. And again, that is so invaluable. Clay was very similar the last few years. Clay doesn't necessarily need everything to be perfect in terms of, shoulder square, feet straight, elbow, elbow out. Like he can still get shots off, even, kind of twisting, turning, and adjusting to the defense, how they're defending him. And I think that's a very important thing to acknowledge. Buddy spaces the floor. He's as good of a floor spacer as you can ask for next to Steph Curry on this roster in particular. He punishes defenders who help off of him. If you help off of Buddy Hield, he will make you pay and pay consistently. You cannot help off of him. He is one of the best shooters of this era. And he's one of the few guys in the league that I can confidently say, whether it's the playoffs, the regular season, whether he's hot or cold, there's no reason that a defender should ever help off of him. The scouting report will always say, stay home on Buddy Hield and close out hard. He draws gravity as a movement shooter. He is someone that's going to come off of screens, curls, pin downs, horn sets, split actions, what have you. And he is someone that's capable of drawing multiple defenders. He can slip easy pocket passes, similar to how Clay did last year, building that chemistry up with Trace Jackson Davis. Buddy Hield has a similar ability in terms of coming off of a screen, defenders selling out on him, drawing that attention, drawing that command, and then finding the roller, finding, even an open shooter who frees up. His ability to just make drop-off reads and passes, find guys who are playing off of his own gravity and movement is such an uncanny attribute because very few shooters can actually pull that off. We look at Steph Curry, obviously he's at the top of that list, but then you continue and it's, maybe Buddy Hield, Klay Thompson, Duncan Robinson, but very few teams sell out on shooters as much as those three guys that I just named. Because obviously Steph is in a tier of his own. There's no team that's ever going to hesitate in selling out on Steph Curry. But when it comes to Buddy, Klay, and Duncan Robinson, they're in the next class of respect and threat. They are a threat behind the arc. And teams will never, ever leave them open under any circumstance. And if they do, and shots go down, timeout. They're calling a timeout because that is a breakdown that cannot happen for any defensive unit. He creates openings, like I said, open lanes to the basket, open lanes on the perimeter. Buddy creates space, right? And spacing is so essential in the modern game. One of the patent plays that we've seen Buddy run in Indiana is the ghost screen. And this is something that we ran also in Golden State with the Warriors, with Klay and Steph in particular. So Steph and Klay would run these ghost screens where either Klay would come up to set a screen and then flare out quickly to the three-point line, or vice versa, Steph would. And what that would do is it would create some confusion for the defense because they would have to decide whether they were going to switch the action, whether they were going to trap the action, what they were going to do in that scenario. They have to make a decision, right? And so more times than not, Steph or Klay would free up, be open for three, and then you just make the read. Either you attack your matchup or you kick out to that open shooter who flares out. Well, Buddy can do much of the same. Buddy Hield is fully capable of setting a ghost screen and flaring out to the three-point line and knocking down shots in rhythm. We've seen him do it in Indiana. He has the skill set for it. He has the feel and the understanding of angles and reading the defense, how to break them down effectively. And Steph Curry has ran that with Klay for years. So with Buddy, similar play calls, similar actions that we can take advantage of against defenses that are set. Because again, these ghost screens, they create confusion. They create miscommunication. Teams don't know necessarily, do they want to switch? Do they want to trap? Someone's going to be left open more times than not. And then last but not least, he gets ran off the line. And how many players in the league can you confidently say are good enough to shoot the ball and get ran off the line, right? Draymond doesn't really get ran off the line. Wiggins doesn't necessarily always get ran off the line. You go down the list of our roster, Jonathan Kuminga, even Moses Moody at times. Buddy Hield is one of the few players we have on this team where You have to run him off the line. It is better to give up a drive for Buddy Hield in an advantage situation than allow him to take a three. So that's another thing that I will say. His read and reactability downhill is going to have to improve this season because he will have driving lanes to make plays, whether it's scoring or whether it's playmaking for others, his creating for his teammates. And so Buddy is going to have to take full advantage of that when defenses sell out on him because he's one of the few shooters on this roster that can command that type of defensive attention. Now, continuing his strengths. One of the things that Buddy's improved on over the years is being a good ball handler. He showed flashes as a secondary handler and playmaker last season, and even the past couple seasons. He's improved in this area. He can run a screen and roll in a pinch. If you're Buddy Hield and the shot clock's at 7, he's not incapable of calling up a screen and making a play, whether it's pulling up for 3 or finding the roll man. He can make simple, quick, easy reads. Nothing advanced, nothing that is, super complex against very tight defenses, but he's capable of running a simple ball screen if he has to in a pinch. And like I said earlier, right, his ball handling's improved over the years, so he's more comfortable running pick and rolls, pulling up against certain matchups, right? He is more comfortable with the ball in his hands. He has an improved ability to create space. He's worked and added the step back jumper to use against one-on-one situations. He uses his hesitations to get past his man, and he has a strong upper body to help absorb contact on drives. So these are some things that Buddy's added, some wrinkles, some, facets of his game, some aspects that he's really keyed in on over the years to leverage because he's not the most explosive athlete. He's not someone that's going to beat you with his first step. He's not going to overpower you on the drive. So Buddy has to be a little bit craftier, a little bit more shifty and shrewd with how he's going to get to his spots and effectively beat you and be effective on the court. So the step back is one way against one-on-one defenders, hesitating off the dribble, creating a little bit of misdirection, and using his shiftiness to his advantage, and then using his body because he does have a 250-pound frame that he can use when he gets to the paint, and he can bump off defenders and absorb contact on those drives. Another thing that I will 100% say next season we will take full advantage of, and teams must look out for, is Buddy Hield locates space in transition as well as anyone. He can fill the gaps when we're running on the break, 215 pounds, 215. He can fill the break, pushing the ball, effective in the open court. He can get to spots, whether it's on the wing or the corner, and defenses have to look out for Buddy Hield at all times. Your radar is on at all moments of the game when Buddy Hield is on the court. You never want to lose sight of him. You never want to lose track of him. And in transition is one of the most deadly situations Buddy Hield can make you pay in because he pushes the ball and he's effective in the open court. He fills space. He knows how to read a transition defense and take full advantage of it, whether, like I said, on the wing or relocating to the corner. And his preference, this is a very important thing. I want people to realize this. Buddy Hield has a clear preference for east to west movement. He's not a north to south player. He's east to west, lateral, side to side. So he's going to be looking to come off of curls. He's going to be looking to fill in gaps, on the wing from baseline to wing. He's not someone that's going to be running necessarily in transition at all times at the top of the key or running elevator screens. He's going to be someone that's, corner to corner, the star drill where he's running from wing to wing and he's going east to west. And that's an area of his game that he can fill the wing spot every single possession. We have Jonathan Kuminga and Andrew Wiggins. They can fill the corner three. They can fill those slots up and knock down shots proficiently. But one thing about Buddy Hield, he's one of the best wing three-point shooters in the league. He uses his foot speed to sneak up on unsuspecting ball handlers on defense. So even though Buddy, and we're going to get into his weaknesses in his on the defensive end, while he's not a great defender on the ball, one thing he tends to do off the ball that's quite effective and a positive is that he speeds up and is able to sneak up behind ball handlers to poke the ball loose. And that leads to transition opportunities that are effective. So he just creates havoc. He's, a little bit more cerebral and tries to find his spots on the defensive end, even though he's not someone that's a stopper on the ball. But he can find the gaps, and if he sees an opportunity to, make a hustle play like that, he'll do that. So that's one thing about Buddy Hield that we might see a little bit of this year is his activity on the defensive end in moments where he feels like he can take advantage of an unsuspecting, ball handler. He can try to, make a play. Is it fair to say for all 48 minutes we need either Steph or Buddy on the court at all times for spacing purposes? I would say maybe not for all 48, but yeah, for the majority of the game, yes. I think Melton and Pods can still do a decent job, but yeah, I would say for at least 36 to 40 minutes, for at least 3.5 quarters, three and a half quarters or so. You want to have Steph's going to be playing around 30-ish minutes. Buddy's going to want to be playing, anywhere from 15 minutes or so, maybe 20, and that time will overlap as well. So I would say, Melton, Pods, they can also take on some of the spacing responsibilities because they are capable of shooting the ball. And if defenses dare them to make shots, they've already shot 38+% in their careers for seasons. So they've shown to be able to, knock shots down at a proficient clip. Now, some weaknesses from Buddy Hield. He's a weak link on the defensive end. In almost any and every lineup that we run this season that Buddy Hield is included in, he will most likely be the weakest link in that lineup. And that's largely due to the fact that he has a slow first step. He doesn't have a lot of burst. He doesn't have a lot of quickness, especially on the defensive end. He plays at a distance for that reason. Because if he pressures the ball handler and he presses up, then he's subject to blow-bys to the rim. And that allows players at times to walk into easy pull-up jumpers. So look out for Buddy this season. There's going to be moments where he gets blown by. There's going to be moments where players pull up in his grill and knock down shots because he's giving them a little bit too much room. He's a, very inconsistent defender, and he has limitations that he attempts to compensate for, and he tries to manage, but it's very difficult for him because, again, he's not the most athletic, he's not explosive, and so there has to be sort of a balance between him being out there and managing his minutes, because on the defensive end, teams do target him in terms of switch hunting.
I just want to bring up a point, if that's okay, Dre.
Mm-hmm.
While I think we all would want to see it, Steph and Buddy together, I think that would be amazing. I don't think we should run it this year because with the way this roster is formed, this roster is leaning defense, right? Well, I know it's going to happen, but I hope Steve only runs them for like 5 to 10 minutes a game, because the problem is Buddy is a clear negative on the defensive end. Like Dre just talked about, he does get blown by a lot. He has to compensate for that by being a bit far back, and people can pull up on him. So it's just a lot of mess, right? When he's going to be out there, we at all times need to put him out there with everyone else has to be a positive defender. When Buddy's on the court, everyone else has to be a neutral or positive. He can't be playing with negative defenders because that will compensate our defense even more, and that will hurt us, right? This year we have to lean defense. That's one thing we got to grill into the head. Defense first. So when
100%.
Buddy's
100%.
I understand all that. Everyone else out there have to be a positive defensively. He can be the only negative defender, because the thing with him is you really can't hide him. Like people, I've seen guys like cook him. I've seen teams try to hide him, and like people just fly him. Like he's really a negative. Like you could hide Clay. Steph's a neutral. At times, Poole was a neutral. Poole was a negative. You could hide Poole. Buddy's just a clear negative. So I really hope Steve realizes that and he leans defense. If Buddy's there, everyone else out next to him have to be solid defensively. And there has to be a rim protector because he gets blown. People blow by him a lot. You have to have a rim protector there that can clean that up. Not someone sliding and then that's an easy kick out for a three, right? That's been one of our issues the past few years. We don't have real rim protection. So someone has to slide in and help, and that leads to open threes. So play Buddy with Trace. Have a rim protector behind him. You know what I mean, Trey?
Yeah, no, 100%. So, Bubba, I want to add to that. One of the things that I mentioned, he's a target of switch hunting. So teams will similar to how Jordan Poole was, where when Jordan was on the court, teams will seek out Jordan in action, put him in the play, put him in the action, and make him defend, draw him out, and really take advantage of his lack of physical tools and his lack of just defensive capabilities. I think Buddy's in a similar sort of category in
Right.
terms of teams really targeting him and making it a point to switch on. This is someone that you don't want on the court when LeBron is out there, because LeBron will put Buddy in action and he will make
Exactly.
Buddy defend.
Exactly. I really want him to be playing with bench units, play him against bench units. And I understand people in chat are saying that we used to be able to hide Clay and Jordan. Well, the thing with Clay is we were able to hide Clay, right? We used to put Clay on bigger wings. If you guys realize, the last few years, the way we used to hide Clay is we used to put him on bigger players. We used to put him on power forwards and small forwards, right? Clay's big enough to play defense against those guys, right? Buddy's not big enough to where you can put him on slower players, and he's bad on defense where you can't hide him on quicker players, right? So you really can't hide Buddy anywhere. My point was Clay, you can hide because he is 6'7" and he was able to guard
Now,
two wings.
now let me expand on that, right? I do want to mention this, right? If you're playing
Oh,
offensive engines like Luka, Jokic, or LeBron, I would keep Buddy Hield away from them.
yeah.
Right? If you're playing offensive engines like Luka, Jokic, and LeBron, I'd keep him away. But I see the chat, and I agree with the chat. And I'm going to get into that a little bit more in terms of hiding him, because I do think as long as Steve is playing the right lineups and the right personnel around him
That's
defensively.
another thing. That's why I want him around defenders, because it becomes easy to hide him. If he's out there with Steph, you can't hide him. How are you going to hide him? Because that means Steph has to guard. And that's the last thing we want to do. This year, we have to prioritize hiding Steph on defense. Steph shouldn't be able to guard. We have to hide Steph and reserve his energy. So if you're playing Steph and Buddy, how can you hide? Who are you going to hide? Like, that's the problem, right? That's why you play Buddy with defensive players around him.
So now we'll get into the lineup combinations a little later. I do want to also add that he expends a lot of the majority of his energy trying to get open on offense. One thing about Buddy Hield is most of his energy, most of his attention is exerted on the offensive end, and so because of that, there's less energy and less attention that he can provide on the defensive end. And as a result, he rarely makes high-level defensive reads. There's times where he gets stuck on both on-ball and off-ball screens, right? When he's put in action, he's chasing a shooter or he's guarding the pick-and-roll ball handler. Buddy isn't necessarily always the most equipped to excel in those positions defensively, because one of the reasons is, yes, he has athletic limitations. He, doesn't have a great first step, a lot of burst, but also he does expend a lot of energy on the offensive end, and that eats at his legs. Now, he also has inconsistent fundamentals defensively. There's times where he closes out too hard on shooters, and he runs them off the line, and maybe he shouldn't in certain situations. He maybe should stop short or contest, but his fundamentals are inconsistent, and then also he falls asleep in his defensive stance, and that leaves him prone to be beat off the dribble, where he's in a defensive stance and he kind of falls asleep a little bit too long, and then the ball handler zips right by him and he's behind the play. So those are things that we're going to look out for, and that's why we have to surround him with positive defenders. Now, one of the other weaknesses that I have to mention is he does almost nothing at an above average level outside of shoot. So he can shoot the ball at an above average level, but he does nothing else. He doesn't defend at an above average level. He doesn't rebound or play make or create his own shot. He does almost nothing else at an above average level. There's certain other things he does at an average level or below average, but when we talk about being a positive rebounder, a positive playmaker, a positive defender, those are things that Buddy Hield should not be expected to do, because that's not his game. That's not his strong suit. He's not much of a connector or a passer in terms of playmaking. He doesn't do a great job creating for others. He hasn't shown an ability to hit weak side shooters in the pick and roll, right? So he's throwing skip passes. His court vision's limited. Those are things. His playmaking is very, very rudimentary. It's very, very basic. It's simple, but it's nothing, complex, expansive. He can kind of be regulated to a ball screen here and there, some isolation possessions, maybe a quick an easy driving kick to a teammate, but that's about it. He's also an infrequent and unproductive cutter. One thing about Buddy that we may get annoyed at this season watching him is there might be times where he's top locked or there's lanes for him to cut in, and he won't necessarily always take them. He just doesn't cut nearly enough and nearly as well as he should for someone that plays as much as he does off the ball. His rim finishing craft is too streaky to be reliable. He's not necessarily a reliable finisher at the basket. Something that he needs to work on is attacking closeouts and being more effective when he's getting to the rim. And his finishing at the basket needs some work still. He's obviously 31 years old, so there's only so much more room for improvement he can have. But his ability to finish with either hand, throw different types of shots off the glass, or counter rotating defenses as he's getting to the basket, it's very limited. He's not very creative, and that's a weakness of his that we're gonna have to take into account. Another area is his suboptimal shot distribution. He has an unwillingness to attack regularly. So, and that goes hand in hand with what I said earlier about him driving the ball to the basket. He lacks both athleticism and speed. He doesn't move as effectively in a north to south direction, meaning when he runs the pick and roll, he's not as effective in getting downhill as he is when he's coming off of a curl or when he's coming off of a split action and he's moving laterally as a shooter versus driving as a slasher. And so his inability to draw many fouls as well takes away from efficient free throw shots and attempts at the line. So I think these are things that we have to take into consideration. His expectations shouldn't be that high as a great scorer, even though he is capable of scoring. I think he's primarily a shooter that can get free, relocate, come off of pin downs and different actions off the ball. At times in a pinch, he can create for himself and for the defense, but or against certain defenses. But I think for the most part, he is a specialist. Now, as far as expectations go, and this is where we're going to get into the detail of what we think he will be next year, what his role should be. I do think he'll have a consistent role and minutes off the bench at shooting guard. He's a three-point specialist. He's a perimeter threat. The volume and efficiency he provides is very, very good. It's been that way for his entire career, especially this decade. And I do view him as a microwave scorer, even though he's not someone that is going to score 15, 20 points a game. He's capable of it here and there. So there's times where if he gets hot, his shot's falling, he's in rhythm. You can feed him the basketball and he can get open and continue that streak. Now, again, in terms of inside the arc, I don't expect Buddy Hield to punish defenses and punish teams inside the arc, especially good rim protection teams. That's not necessarily his bread and butter. So again, I think can he get to the basket occasionally? Yes. Can he take his defender off the dribble and a pull up three, run a ball screen? Off the move, a step back, sure. He's capable of doing that here and there occasionally. But again, that shouldn't be expected on a game-to-game basis. I do view him as an elite weapon in the motion offense. In the motion offense, that's perfectly built for what Buddy Hield does. He's an off-ball threat. He's going to run off the screens. He's going to relocate to find space, trailing in transition, drawing attention from defenders. These are things that create havoc. He's a very flow and system player. He can fit right into what we do and how we play. The style with which we approach the game of basketball is very oriented on ball movement and player movement, and that's what Buddy Hield's all about. As a floor spacer, he can make shots off of half-court actions as well. So we're talking about split actions. We're talking about horns, pin downs, even the hammer play. There's ways that we can free Buddy up in the half court effectively, and we can utilize his off-ball movement and his off-ball abilities to create shots for him and for others. Like I said, he draws attention from defenders. So there's going to be times where he can find defenders who are cutting or diving to the basket, kick out to shooters when they're over helping. There's things that Buddy Hield can do as a playmaker that Steve needs to look at and find ways to take advantage of, because there will be some spacing, there will be some creation value there if he really keys in on it enough. And like I said, him being an off-ball threat and a weapon in the motion offense, I mean, outside of Steph, Buddy Hield is probably the only other option that we have that is capable of consistently demanding the defense's respect, especially off the ball as a shooter. And then lastly, I said he will be a net negative defensively. I don't think anyone here expects him to be a positive. He could be a neutral, but I think for now we should expect him to be just a slight negative on the defensive end. He's able to blend in and hide a bit, though. I think given our personnel, if we surround him with the right pieces, with the right lineups, I think there's a chance. Even next to Steph, you can run a Steph, Buddy, Wiggins, Kyle, Trace lineup. Or you could run a Steph, Buddy, JK, Draymond, Trace lineup.
So
There's
you
different combinations that you could run to where you can hide and limit Buddy Hield as a defender. Now, obviously, having Steph and Buddy there out on the court at the same time, it does create some matchup issues still because you don't want defenses to have the pick of the litter in terms of, who should we go after on the perimeter. Obviously, we want to limit that as much as possible. So even in the moments where Steph and Buddy are out there, if they're surrounded by good front court defenders, I still think we should keep those minutes to a minimum. Because ideally, if you're playing the best offensive engines, then we should probably run the best, most optimal defensive lineups. But however, like I said, you play him next to Trace, you play him next to Wiggins, you play him next to Melton or Anderson. I think those combinations will prove positive in Buddy Hield lineups. But the key is surrounding him with defenders, the same way we
right.
did with Jordan Poole.
But Dre, like would you only play the Steph? So people are saying the Steph, Buddy, Wiggs, Dre, TJD lineup. I think that can work, but I wouldn't play it against the top teams. I would only play that lineup against the bad teams or the mid teams, because if you play it against the top teams have multiple guys that can create their shots. So there isn't enough guys to hide Steph and Buddy on, right? Because everyone in that lineup is so good offensively that they can attack Steph and Buddy. What do you think about that? You'd only run it against bad teams or like mid teams, right? Or you'd run it in spurts against the good teams.
I would run him in spurts against good teams, see what he has on a given night. If he's hot,
Right, yeah.
if he's knocking his shots down, then you just ride the hot hand and you see what he can
Exactly,
do.
yeah. If he's hot, you play him. I agree with that. Because when he has it going, he can really hit a lot of crazy stuff. We've seen it before.
And I think Romario Punk makes a good point. I think there's certain matchups where Buddy can be an above average playmaker, right? I think it's matchup dependent. But if you're playing a team like OKC or Boston or New York or Minnesota, I think those better defensive teams can exploit his lack of playmaking and do a better job of really defending him, cutting off his counters, and turning him into a very, standstill kind of specialist that's very limited. Sort of like, what we've seen in years past with specialists and players that are just only capable at shooting the basketball in terms of that being an elite skill. Because, yes, he can play make, he's capable, but is he someone that's going to be an above average playmaker against the better defenses? Most likely not. Because in order to do that, you have to be able to have enough court vision to throw skip passes, to find the corner man, to, drop off to the roller at the right time. And these defenses are rotating, they're switching, they have length, they have size, and they're closing out hard. So the more, the more rigorous the defenders that you face are, the more difficult it will be to counteract them. Now, as I mentioned earlier, though, I think similar to how Jordan, we surrounded him with Gary Payton, with Otto Porter, Wiggins, right? We put really quality defenders, connectors around Jordan Poole to make his skill set work, right? Jordan didn't have to focus on connecting lineups. He didn't have to focus on being the secondary playmaker or a screener or a defender at the point of attack. He didn't have to rebound or close out on shooters. Jordan could hide effectively defensively. He was out of plays. He was not involved. And we were managed, we managed to actually win those minutes with Jordan for that reason, because we had every piece that complemented his skill set while also offsetting his limitations and weaknesses. And I think that's a similar frame of light that I view what Buddy Hield in is, You want to have players that complement his skill set. Kyle Anderson does, for example. Draymond does. Trace does. But you also want to have players that are able to cover up and limit his weaknesses defensively. So we're talking about Melton, Wiggins, point of attack defenders
That's
that
why
can
I
take
would
that burden
always
off of
play.
him.
That's why if I'm Steve, I hope Steve realizes this, and Steve plays them with like a Melton, a Trace, a Kyle, a Wiggins, a Kaminga. I think Kaminga and Buddy would be really good because they can complement each other. But I think one thing we have to do is we have to play Buddy with a rim protector. So play him with Trace a lot, and I think that can really offset some of his weaknesses. Because if he does, get blown by, Trace is a really good rim protector to where he can recover on the ball handler and get back to the roll man, the big, right? Trace is good in that two-man action. So play him a lot with Trace because Trace can help his weaknesses, and he and Trace can also have that chemistry that Clay and Trace did, right? That little dump off pass when Buddy gets two thrown at him, he can make that dump off pass to Trace. So I think they'll just complement each other really well, and those two should definitely play together a
And
lot.
similar to how Steph and Draymond have the ability to run DHOs, they have the ability
Exactly.
to run a two-man game. I think Kyle and Buddy can be a similar version of
Right,
that off the
right,
bench.
right. Yeah, you can be flexible. We have versatility to help Buddy heal. Buddy Hield is a fine addition because we have guys that can help fix his flaws. We had guys that helped Jordan's flaws out, and we also have guys that can help Buddy's flaws. So Kyle, Trace, JK, Wiggins, Melton, Pods, they can help, protect Buddy. And it's gonna be a team effort. But yeah, for sure, Kyle and Buddy can have chemistry. Trace and Buddy can have chemistry. Remember, they were throwing two at Clay. Clay would throw that dump pass. Buddy's more than capable of doing that. And he will get the same attention Clay did off those pin downs.
What I
So
like
it's
about
just a
Buddy
lot
though,
of
what
versatility.
I like about Buddy in particular though, and you're 100% right. The versatility is far greater this season to where we can insulate those players,
We
right?
can help our weak players on the defensive end. We can help them, and they can help
Exactly.
our defenders. Everyone complements each other. The offensive players will be protected by the defensive players, and the defensive guys have offensive guys to help them. Everyone's helping each other. It's all connected. That's important. That's what we've been missing the last few years. Pieces that connect.
And you know what? Last season, right? GP2 was injured a lot. He was kind of out of the
Exactly.
lineup. Wiggins wasn't really himself till January. So those two guys were tasked with insulating Steph, Clay, and CP3, and they just didn't play up to par. I think this season we have much more players that are capable of insulating those players, right? So you have Melton, Anderson, Draymond, Trace, Wiggins. These guys that just like in 2022, insulating Jordan Poole, not having him have to do too much other than what he's good at, not forcing him to play outside of his own skill set and his own strengths, keeping him in line with what he does best. That is what we need to do with Buddy Hield. I don't want to see three guard lineups with Steph, Buddy, and Pods because that doesn't make any sense when we have Wiggins, we have Melton, we have Moody, we have Kyle. We have a lot of versatility on the roster and a lot of length, defenders to protect and to insulate a specialist like this who should be out there for spacing, who should be on the court for volume and efficient shooting. And I think, one of the unique things about Buddy is, like you said earlier, he can get hot. He's streaky, but he can get hot. And when he gets hot,
And
you want him on the court.
right, great. You brought up a good point. I don't know if you mentioned this in the Kyle breakdown, but I think Kyle's gonna help with the three guard lineups this year. I think Steve should not be playing a lot of three guard lineups because we have Kyle. Instead of playing those three guard lineups, play Kyle. Kyle can be that secondary ball handler that can make plays, run the offense, and he's also a good defender, right? The Iguodala type, the Sean Livingston type. We never played three guard lineups when we had Iggy and Sean because Iggy and Sean were big, strong wings that can play, make, and defend. That's what Kyle is, right? So I think he shouldn't play a lot of three guard lineups, and he has no excuses. I will be on his ass
Yes,
because
yes.
you have Kyle Anderson now, aka the Iggy Sean type. You haven't had that the last few years, so the three guard lineups are somewhat excusable. So play
And just to
Kyle.
add, right? Just to add, one of the
Yeah.
other strengths of Buddy is his ability to improvise and to relocate and find space. So when we talk about a Draymond and a Kyle Anderson being able to look for with the court vision they have to to find a Buddy. Just like Steph, right? Steph does the same thing. You want to have players like that out there, just like Klay, right? Last season, we're going to miss Klay's shot making volume, and at times he got hot. He won us games, right? So now Buddy is going to be a version of Klay Thompson. I don't know what version, but he's going to be a version of that. He's going to be the replacement for what Klay provided, because there's now a void in terms of shooting and spacing that Klay left. And I think Buddy's going to fill that. Now, the question is, to what degree? Is it enough? We're going to find out. But I do think he will provide a lot of value this season, and he needs to be out there because he will free up a lot of the lineups that we have.
I will also say we got the perfect Klay Thompson replacement. I will also say Buddy Hield at this point in their careers is a way better offensive player than Klay Thompson. He can get his spots better. He can create more space off those pin downs, and he's a quick shooter, and he's more efficient, and the shots are more likely to go in because he has his legs. His legs aren't gone by Achilles and ACL. When Klay was coming off those pin downs, a part of the reason why he wasn't able to get a lot of space is because of those injuries, right? When Buddy's going to be coming off those pin downs, he will be able to get a lot of space, create a lot of space, and be more effective in volume because he doesn't have lower leg injuries. So I think we did a good job in replacing Klay by getting someone like him, but in my opinion, a better offensive version than Klay is right now, just because he's more healthier. You know what I mean? That matters. Like off those pin downs, people were saying, "Yo, Klay wasn't washed." It's just off those pin downs, he's no longer able to create the space that he once did.
The
But
separation,
he was
yep.
able to do that. So I think he's a better replacement, honestly.
And Buddy will be a seamless fit. There isn't going to be a steep learning curve or a long adjustment period. He's going to know exactly how to fit in because his skill set complements this system to a T. So he'll know how to come off of screens effectively, and he even can learn from Steph the tricks of the trade in terms of angles and using his body. I'm sure they can, use each other in terms of understanding like what they do best and how they can perfect their craft. So I think Buddy is just from an approach standpoint, from a skill set standpoint, from a culture standpoint. I think he fits right in, and I'm excited, man. And
You
again, I like that.
mentioned one of his weaknesses you mentioned. I want to clarify. You were saying he's a bad cutter, right? One of the reasons for that is he's never played in a system like the Warriors system. I think now that he'll be on our system and he's going to be playing with Steph, Pods, Draymond, all of our guys, I think he will become a better cutter. Because in the past, the system he played on, they didn't have guards cut like that, right? Our system is notorious. We're known for having guards cut. So I think with us, he will be cutting a lot more just because of the system. He will learn the system and he will buy in, and Steve will help him with that. And I think Steph will help him with that as well. So I don't think that's going to be a huge weakness because he's going to be playing in our system.
Yeah. And like I said, Klay left a void. I think he'll fill that void to some degree. The question is, to what degree? And I think that'll really depend on Steve and how many minutes he decides to play Buddy and what lineups he decides to play him in. So let's get to the player projection. I have Buddy Hield at 22.6 minutes per game next season, averaging 10.8 points, 2.7 rebounds, 2.5 assists, a steal, zero point 0.4 blocks on 44% from the field, 40.8% from three, and 87% at the line. He's going to be a plus 86 next season. I think he'll be a positive in the games he plays, in the lineups he's in. Overall, I do trust that Steve will surround him with high-level quality defenders that can connect lineups and that can do a good job of protecting him and his weaknesses. He has to be hidden on defense, especially if he's playing next to Pods and Steph. But I do have him averaging double-digit scoring. And I do also acknowledge that, his minutes per game might be more than 22, 23. He might average closer to 25. I think this is a fair range. I don't expect him to average, 15 points. I think that's a little bit high. Just because I think we have so many guards on this roster in particular, right? We have Melton, Pods, Steph, obviously, Moody, and now Buddy. There's a lot of guards, and I just don't see him necessarily being, one of the more premier guards. I don't see him closing games, and I don't see him starting games. So he's probably going to fall somewhere in between that second quarter, start of, the second quarter, and middle of the game, third quarter. He's going to find spot minutes. I think he plays about 10 minutes a half, maybe 10, 11 minutes or so. But I don't really see him starting or closing. He'll be mostly a player that's in between those 48 minutes. And he'll be a microwave scorer. He'll do his damage. He'll be a guy that wins you some regular season games. Now, in terms of projecting him for the playoffs, if we make it that far, I'm not so sure his skill set lends to a playoff atmosphere. We saw last season he struggled. He was out of the rotation in Philly. He wasn't getting much playing time at all in the playoffs. He did have a huge game 6 that almost won them the ability to go to a game 7. But ultimately, I don't think Buddy is a guy that, he's more of like a ninth man or, a 10th man in the playoffs. I don't view him as like a 7th man, or a 6th man.
I in the first round, if you're really down bad and you need spacing, I would throw Buddy in there. He's hit or miss. If Buddy, you play him for 5 minutes, he hits 2 threes and he's feeling it, you keep him out there. If he's not, you pull him out. That's how I would play Buddy. Kind of like how we did with Swaggy. Remember, we used to play him in the playoffs, and when he had it going, Steve used to let him roll, right? When Buddy has it going, just leave him out there. When he's struggling, just pull him out, right? Because in theory, he can't help you in the playoffs if he has it going and he's hitting his threes. So
now I do want to point to something that was said earlier. A few things actually. So first, someone mentioned that Buddy's playmaking. I think Buddy's playmaking can take a step this year, more so than we've ever seen, in a way that we didn't anticipate because of the system that we're playing, because of the motion offense that we have. And I think that what it can do is it can amplify and it can accentuate what Buddy Hield does best in a way that no team has ever done before. So not only do we have to view Buddy Hield as to what he was last year, but we should also view him as to what he will be in the Warriors offense, in the system next to Steph and under Steve Kerr. And so I look at his playmaking. I think that'll take a bit of a step. I think he'll be a better on-ball, but mostly off-ball playmaker. I think we'll find ways to exploit the defense, similar to how we use with Clay, and really have Buddy be a focal point, an underlining component to breaking the defense down in the second units, because he's able to move off the ball effectively, and he has the ability to force defenses to shift, rotate, and close out on him. Respect his jumper, and the fact that he has averaged 8.5 attempts on threes over the last 5 years, shooting 39% in terms of that clip, I think that speaks volumes to his capability as a shooter. He's as good as they come in terms of efficiency and volume. And like I said, those shots add up. And if you run him off the line, he can get to the rim here and there. He can kick out to another shooter. And so I think fitting him into the offense in the second unit is going to be huge, making sure that he's not just one-dimensional, turning him into a bit of a playmaker, leveraging his shooting to create plays for others. That is what Steve Kerr does best. So I hope that that's something that we lean into. Secondly, and this was another point that I thought someone else made, which was very interesting as well, is as far as Clay goes and his shot selection, I think Buddy is a little bit more measured and calculated with the shot selection. Even though there's times where he'll take heat checks, he'll try to, get in rhythm and knock shots down at a proficient clip. Obviously, that's what he does. He's out there to shoot. I do think he's much more within himself, and he doesn't try to, hit home run shots all the time the same way Clay did. I don't think he tries to play outside of himself and outside of the offense. I think he understands his role. If the shot isn't there, if it doesn't present itself, he's not going to force it. He's going to keep the ball moving, and he's going to keep moving off the ball, right? Try to generate new looks. He's going to improvise, and he's going to create havoc. So that is another thing that I expect next season is Buddy Hield just being a more team-oriented shooter than, Clay was. Because I feel like Clay at times was looking to get himself into rhythm rather than, actually playing within the flow of the offense. Now, I also want to add with Buddy, there is a world where he looks like, so for example, Otto Porter, right? Nobody thought Otto would be the playmaker and defender he was with us. We knew he could shoot. We knew he could, rebound a little bit. We knew his strengths were there. He was just a very solid player. but nobody thought he'd be the connector he was. I know traditionally Buddy hasn't been a connector. There's a world where Buddy is a connector. The same way we found a way to make Damian Lee an effective player in between, whether it was screen setting, misdirection, passing, just making simple reads, putting him in basic situations to be that, secondary playmaker, that ball handler, organizing the offense, just being involved in the plays. I think that's something Buddy has the ability to do. I just don't think it's been tapped into by other teams. So I to look out for Steve to put Buddy in certain situations because I think we have the versatility to really utilize his skill set. I think he's a much more layered player than we've seen. And that was the case for Otto too, by the way. We didn't think Otto was capable of running split actions and being a connective passer, right? And doing all these things, attacking closeouts here and there. I think with Buddy, there's a similar element of surprise. That element of surprise, I think, exists. So look out for Buddy to surprise. I think there's a world where he does things that some people are, a little bit, unexpected with. And I think that's a good thing because that's what we tend to do here on the Warriors. We tend to make players look better than they are. We tend to make players excel at areas of their game that they have yet to explore and they have yet to tap into. For example, another one, Dante DiVincenzo. Nobody thought Dante would be the player he was when we signed him, except for, a few. I was one of those people. I was one of the people that thought Dante would be a great hit for us, a great pickup. And the reason was because I didn't view Dante as he was with the Bucks. I viewed him as he would be with the Warriors. And so as a cutter, right, we saw Dante in more cutting actions, slipping screens, running ghost screens, like I mentioned earlier, popping out for shots, empowered to take shots when he's open, right? Flaring out, spotting up in the corner, getting to the rim, driving the ball, making plays, driving kicks. So I think Dante was put in a lot of positions as well that were really, really advantageous and that also highlighted some skills that he had that many were not aware of, right? People were not aware that Dante could be as versatile as he was. And then look at what he does in New York now, expanding his game further. So I think Buddy is a very similar player. I think we can make, areas of his game pop. We can expand certain areas of his game too. And we can, surprise a lot of people in terms of what he's capable of because I don't think, we've fully tapped into what Buddy Hield can do. And I also want to point this out as well. The cutting standpoint, I think we've seen guards come and go on this roster for years. Obviously, I mentioned Dante. Damian Lee is another. You can go down the list. Jordan Poole. All of the guards that I've named and all of the guards that we've seen over the years, they've been good cutters. Most of them have always been good cutters, with the exception of maybe Chris Paul. Like, Dante was a very capable cutter off the ball. You look at Damian Lee, right? He was a very sneaky cutter, someone that filled in the spots in 45 cuts and was able to fill space in when needed. His read of the game, his feel for the game. I believe Buddy can be a very similar player in terms of, like Bubba said, expanding his game as a cutter because other teams maybe don't have, if you're running misdirection, for example, and you have Steph setting a screen, is the defense going to go to Steph or Buddy? If Steph is setting a screen for Buddy, they're going to go to Steph. And Buddy can slip and just get an easy layup. And that right there is a cutting opportunity. That's an action that can really, really highlight and, emphasize his abilities off the ball. I don't think we've fully explored Buddy Hield's off-ball capabilities. So I think he'll be a better offensive player than people realize. Again, these are rough estimates of what I think will happen, but he could easily shoot 46% from the field next year. His career high is around 45, 46. So I played it a little safer and I said 44. But I could see him averaging 45 plus. I could see him shooting 42% from three. All of that is possible. And, I just am not sure how many minutes he'll play because we do have a logjam at the guard position. And Steve has to balance that between Melton, Pods, Steph, Buddy. And so, yeah, there's not enough minutes to go around. And I didn't even mention Moody yet, right? Moody is another player that, we have to factor in too. So, and one more thing I want to mention too. We can definitely see Buddy Hield organizing the offense as a secondary ball handler, organizing our sets, getting us into our actions, initiating. I'm not saying he's going to be a high-level on-ball playmaker, breaking the defense down, driving, kicking, doing all that, but I can see Buddy Hield just being a trigger man and getting guys into their spots. He's a capable ball handler. He's played, a little bit of guard, and he's comfortable with the ball in his hands. It's not foreign to him. And and in the pick and roll too, he can pull up. He's capable of running a ball screen in a pinch. All of these things are more modernized wrinkles we can add to our own offense because he is capable of that. In my opinion, I believe he is more capable in the pick and roll than Klay as a ball handler. As great as Klay is, and he can pull up from three, I think Buddy Hield just is more diverse in his skill set in terms of making a pick and roll read or, pulling up from three or beating his man off the dribble. I think he just has a little bit more to his game, a few more layers. But ultimately, Klay is the overall better scorer and player. So I think those are big shoes to fill, but I expect Buddy Hield to be a positive next season. And he will be in the game throughout, the course of the year with multiple lineups. It's not going to look the same every night. Some nights he might play next to Pods. Some nights he may play next to Melton. Some nights he may play next to Draymond. Other nights he may play next to Trace or Kyle. We have so much versatility on the roster, it's impossible to say who Buddy Hield will play next to. And I think that has as much to do with the prediction and what he does on the court than anything else. Because if Buddy Hield is surrounded by the right players, not only will he be positive for us, but he will be a crucial piece. Assuming we make it into the playoffs, he will be a crucial piece on that stage. Because I'm telling you, you need to have shot makers when you get there. But for now, let's see what he looks like. Let's see what Steve does. I think it's all about the defensive end for us. And Buddy Hield, while he doesn't provide that, he provides a complementary skill that allows those defenders to be out there and to excel the same way that Steph and Klay have over years. So that is the Buddy Hield breakdown.